Because the one who does not have al-Islam in his life, he is in the darkness. The one who does not have Islam in their life, they do have many unanswered questions that are very important for the physical health and for the mental health and for the spiritual health. Without Islam, the person is lost and they sway with every wind. So they would be manipulated and molded and lied to, and they fall for it. Or they'll be told to go here, go there, and they go here and they go there, and then they realize that there's negative consequences. So with Islam, the human being, he can achieve success in this life and in the hereafter. He can achieve success for himself. If what he wants is a good thing, then he can walk that path with success and live a dignified life and be a good person and living for paradise, living for the day that you will leave this world. Many people have an attachment to this world, and even amongst the Muslims, and for sure amongst the non-Muslims, because since they don't have Islam in their way of thinking, all they have is this world, because they don't have a certainty about the hereafter. They don't know for sure about what happens after you die. So they're just throwing themselves into a guessing game, and they imagine things and they wish that it'll be like all good for everyone, but it's not. There's a place that exists now called paradise, and there's none of the people of this earth are inside the part of it that it is for after Judgment Day, because there are some souls that are already in paradise, like the souls of the pious Muslims. Once their body disappears from the grave, because of a lot of time passing, so the body would disintegrate, and it wouldn't be because it's being consumed or tortured in any way, because the pious Muslim, he gets no torture. So then after the pious Muslim, after his body completely decays, his soul will go to paradise, and it will remain there until Judgment Day, until the resurrection. And then when the new body is resurrected, the soul joins it, and then now they begin their journey together, then a body and soul, the immortal body. Now this is the immortal body, the body of the afterlife that has been recreated from a small piece of this worldly body called the Hajj. So it's like there's a small piece of the human body right now. It's at the end of the tailbone. They call it coccyx, and that uh piece, or it's the smallest piece. It could be that term, or it could be just there's a small tiny piece at the end of the tailbone, and that piece doesn't disappear, and then the bodies will be recreated from those pieces, and then it'll be the immortal body, and then the soul joins it, and they start their journey on through Judgment Day until they cross the bridge. And for the pious Muslim, it's going to be easy. For the pious Muslim, it's going to be celebrated. It's going to be a victory. It's going to be the day of triumph. It's going to be the day of the great victory, which is to be safe in the hereafter. Uh, on Judgment Day, which is the day of horrors for those that did not prepare. So it's about preparing for the afterlife. This world, this existence that we're in, it's about preparing for the afterlife. When you focus on that, all your problems will disappear. In the sense that whatever happens to you, whatever happens to you, this is what you have to go through, and that no matter what you go through, you always have to obey Allah. And no matter what you go through, you always have to do what's right. And no matter what you go through, you always have to be a pious Muslim. And then with that mentality, you get through life. You get through life with that mentality. When you start to shift away from that mentality and you start thinking in other terms, then that's when things become more mentally difficult. There's a certain negative feeling that comes with not having the right mindset as a Muslim living in this world. Even though the world is hard and the world is difficult, but that's mentioned in the Quran. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد، أي في شدة، في مشقة وشدة. So it's no secret that this world is difficult, but this world is not forever. So no matter what happens, we still adhere to Al-Islam, and we follow in the footsteps of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he is the the final prophet who was sent as a guide, and those who follow him are guided. So whoever wants to be guided should follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the only way to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is by acquiring the knowledge and implementing it. Knowing how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam lived, knowing how he prayed, knowing how he fasted, knowing how he paid zakah, and how he instructed us to do it. And there's no way to know except through learning. So we're going to continue on, alhamdulillah, with az-zakah. We're going to start talking about gold. And so gold and silver was the normal currency that was used in the past, or the major currency that was used in the past. People bought their properties and their vehicles and their food and their fuel with gold and silver. And that's the basis for money. even the money that we have nowadays, we can assess the value of the currency based on the gold and silver standard. Now, there was other types of money that was used, some copper money, copper like not gold and silver as the metal, and also paper money too. There was paper money. Uh, but I don't know much about the history of that, but there was paper money in the past. So for this gold, how it applies to us now, either you have some of these coins, which there are many people that do have gold coins or and silver coins. Or if you have this gold, yani the amount of it, the weight of it, the grams of gold, then when it reaches to the equivalent of 20 dinars, which are gold coins, or it's the Islamic gold standard, which is a specific weight. I'll mention it inshallah. But so that's the minimum amount. The quotum of gold is 20 mithqal, and 20 dinars. And that of silver is 200 dirham. So the grammage, the amount of grams of silver that exist in 200 silver dirhams, which is the silver coin, the Islamic silver coin, that amount of grams, if someone has that amount of grams of silver, that's the minimum amount that they have to have in order for them to be uh, obligated to pay zakah. The amount due on the zakah of gold and silver is 1/40th. So 1/40th, 1/40 on the gold and 1/40 on the silver. Um, so I think in decimals that comes out to 2.5%. So 2.5% of the amount of gold that is at least 20 dirhams or more, and 2.5% of the amount of silver that is 200 dirhams or more in grams. And inshallah, I'll mention the amount. The surplus beyond the quotum is calculated proportionately. So if that means if you have 20 gold coins, you pay 2.5% of 20. If you have 25 gold coins, you pay 2.5% of 25 gold coins. If you have 100 gold coins, you pay 2.5% of that. If you have 1,000 gold coins, you pay 2.5% of that. If you have 1,000,000 gold coins, you pay 2.5% of that. Allahu Akbar. That's a lot. That is, the value. If you have 1,000,000 gold coins, then you have a lot. That's I don't know how to calculate that by today's standard, but for sure it's in the hundreds of millions, hundreds of millions. And the same for silver coins. So if you have 200 dirhams, you pay 2.5% of 200. If you have 300 dirhams, you pay 2.5%. If you have 1,000,000 dirhams, you pay 2.5% of that amount. So the requirement is once you have the minimum amount, it's a requirement that 1 year of ownership elapses on them after reaching the quotum. So when you um, get to that minimum amount, let's say today you got 20 gold coins. So now that is the minimum amount that you would have to pay zakat on. So today you got the 20 gold coins. And so you have to have those 20 at least. You can't go below 20 for one whole lunar year, for an entire lunar year. So if 1 year from today you still have the same 20 gold coins, it never went below 20, then at the end of that year, you pay 2.5% in zakat. So we see how easy it is to calculate. So let's say today you get the 20 gold coins, but then next week you spend 10 gold coins. So now you're back down to 10. You had 20 and you spent 10, now you have 10. So now you don't have to pay zakat now. So if next week you spend the 10 gold coins and then a year passes and you still have the same 10 gold coins, you don't have to pay zakah because you didn't keep the minimum amount for at least a year. Now, say you have 100 gold coins, and then at the end of the year, you only have 50. So you can pay the zakah on that, on the 50, and so on. However, zakah on gold and silver extracted from ore or taken from treasure troves must be paid immediately. 1/5 is due on the treasure trove. So there's this other type of gold, yani that's besides gold coins, besides jewelry, besides like gold bars. You have the gold when it's still like mixed together with the rocks, because the way that gold is extracted is that you dig under the ground and uh, you chip off certain pieces of the earth, and the gold is inside of it or mixed with it, and you have to take all the stuff that's not gold, take it apart and clean it out until only gold is left. And then it's melted and forged into a mold. So if it's going to be made into coins, it'll be molded into a coin. If it's going to be made into bars, it'll be molded into bars. There's different ways. They have different ways to like keep it and store it. They can just like melt it down and just keep it like that, melted until they want to use it for something, and then they mold it into whatever they want. So when the gold it has still not been separated from the rocks and from the stuff that's not gold. So that one you don't have to wait a year to pay the zakat on it. You pay it immediately. Um, and the other type of gold is a treasure trove. So if you find like a buried treasure, which people still find, they claim that they find. Recently, there was some. I think it was an article or like a news segment online, like a video clip, or it could have been just on a reel on Instagram. But anyways, the some people in California, I think, they dug in their backyard and they found 1 million gold coins or some high amount. So that's a treasure trove. So if those coins are from before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the revelation, before the bi'athah, then the Muslim he can keep it and he pays immediately zakat on it 1/5. So not 2.5%, not 1/40th, pays 1/5. and he pays it right away. He doesn't have to wait for a year. If the coins were from after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the revelation, then the Muslim has to try and find the owner of it. Yani the Muslim owner, because it could possibly be owned by a Muslim, because it's after the bi'tha. So because of that, the Muslim, if the coins are after the revelation, then they wouldn't be able to just keep it right away because it could possibly be a Muslim's, and so they would have to find the Muslim owner. And then if they're unable to find the Muslim owner, then that money becomes fate, becomes property of the Muslim treasury. And if there's no Muslim treasury, then a pious Muslim who knows how to distribute it for the general welfare of the Muslim nation, he's allowed to use it for that, for those purposes. And if the person is a poor Muslim, he can keep it. But there's a process to be able to finally get to the point where you're not able. So it's not just like right away. Any questions about that before moving on? Okay, good question. So paper money in the Shafi'i school and the madhab of al-Imam al-Shafi'i radiyallahu anhu. In his madhab, paper money is not zakatable. It's not subject to zakah. However, according to al-Imam Abu Hanifa radiyallahu anhu, who was also a great Imam, and al-Imam al-Shafi'i had great respect and esteem for al-Imam Abu Hanifa, and to the point where al-Imam al-Shafi'i, he would say, whenever I have like something that I'm trying to solve something that I can't seem to get a solution, I go to the grave. I pray 2 rak'ahs before, and then I go to the grave of Abu Hanifa. I make dua at the grave of Abu Hanifa, and I make dua to Allah that such and such thing is facilitated by the status of Abu Hanifa. So he says, "Oh Allah, facilitate for me such and such a matter by the status of Abu Hanifa," and then he's there at the grave as well. Yani Shafi'i, this is where he's making the dua because the grave of Abu Hanifa is blessed. Because Abu Hanifa is a wali, he's an alim, he's a scholar, he's a mujtahid, he's a righteous Muslim. He is alim, amil. He is from the ulama al-amilin al-salihin. MashaAllah. It was mentioned about Abu Hanifa that for 40 years he prayed al-Isha and al-Fajr, al-Subuh with the same wudu. That means he would stay up all night praying for 40 years. Allahu Akbar. So in the madhab of al-Imam Abu Hanifa, radiyallahu anhu, paper money is zakatable. It is subject to zakah. So the way to do it in the school of al-Imam Abu Hanifa, radiyallahu anhu, is to take the amount, the value of the 200 dirhams, let's say, uh, because in the Hanafi school, you do the zakah on the paper money with the currency that's the most beneficial. And in this case, it would be the silver because the 200 dirhams, which is about 21 ounces of pure silver, and that amount is less. So, uh, let me just find real quick, see if I can find it today, how much 21 ounces of silver would be, so we can just use dollar figures. So basically, let's say that the silver, the 200 dirhams, the first quotum of silver, which is approximately 21 ounces of pure silver. Let's say that the value of that was, let's say, $500. Okay, so let's say that 21 ounces of pure silver is equal to 500 American dollars. Okay, this is just for the calculation. I'm not saying that that's the actual price today of silver, but we're just using that as an example. Okay, so we're using the uh the silver, the price of silver per ounce today, estimating at 500 American dollars. So for that amount, if the Muslim, he has $500 in his, let's say, bank account, and a year passes on that, so he stays at 500 for a year, and then at the end of that year, he pays 2.5% of $500. And the same thing if, like, let's say if he has $10,000 in the bank for a year, at the end of the year, he pays 2.5% on that 10,000. If he has 50,000, he pays 2.5% on that 50,000. If he has 100,000, he pays 2.5% on that. That's how it works. Yeah, and of course, with certain conditions, etc., the person has to be, you know, uh, have no. There's certain things that would prevent him from paying zakah, but if he's clear of all those things, then that's basically how it works. If he has over that minimum amount of the 200 dirhams, which is approximately 21 ounces of silver, so he checks, let's say, on the internet, and he finds out how much is 21 ounces of silver worth. So it'll be, let's say, about $500. So if he has less than $500, he doesn't have to pay zakah. If he has $500 or more for a year, then at the end of that year he pays 2.5%. That's how it goes with paper money. So the paper money is the zakah is paid on it according to the silver, the quotum of silver. So the same way. And so if the person wants to pay zakah according to Abu Hanifa, he has to do that. He has to make that calculation. The person wants to pay according to a Shafi'i, he has to actually get the gold. So if you have that amount of gold or silver, like I say, you have a lot of gold jewelry or a lot of silver jewelry, you find out how many grams of gold are in it, and then if that amount is more than the 20 dinars at the end of the year, you pay 2.5% of that. And in the Shafi'i school, you pay with the actual gold. So either you buy that amount of gold that you have to pay, and then you give that gold in zakah, or you give from the gold that you have. MashaAllah. طيب. Now we're going to talk about the trade articles. So trade articles are anything that you sell with the intention of making a profit. And so then you can take that profit and then buy more things with the intention to sell to gain a profit. So then buy more things with the intention to sell and gain a profit, etc. That's trade articles. So that's buying and selling, commerce. For example, the person he bought 1,000 shirts. He sells the 1,000 shirts. He gets the money that he made. Then he takes that money. He buys, let's say, 100 cell phones. Then he buys, for example, cars. Right, so he's buying cars and selling them, buying cars and selling them, buying cars and selling them. That to make a profit. This is called trade articles. So it's not one specific thing. It's whatever it gets used like that. So the quotum of zakah on trade articles is the quotum of gold or silver with which they were purchased. So if you bought the merchandise with gold, so then you base the zakah on the gold standard, the 20 dirhams. If you bought the merchandise with the silver, you base the zakah on the 200 dirhams, the silver. Uh, the gold standard is the 20 dinars. The silver is the dirham. So if you bought with the silver, you base it on the 200 dirhams. If you bought it with paper money, then you're gonna go with the silver. You're gonna base it on the silver. But remember, uh, in the Shafi'i school, it has to be paid with gold or silver. The Hanafi school can be paid with paper money, and the equivalent amount of that gold or silver in paper money. Consideration of the quotum is held off until the end of one lunar year. The amount due is 1/40th of the value. So at the end of the year, you take your merchandise and you do inventory and you find out how much would it be? How much would you get if you sold it all that day? Let's say if you sold it, you sold all your merchandise at once. How much would it be? So that amount, if it's uh, at least the quotum or more, then they pay 1/40th, and 2.5%. The mixed wealth of two or more persons is the same as the wealth of one person in regards to the quotum and due zakah. This is true if the conditions for mixing wealth are met. So there's a certain type of business model that exists in Islam where uh, the two people that have the capital, so they, for example, would pool their capital together. They would put together their money in a way that now you cannot tell whose money is who. So I mix my gold coins with my partner's gold coins, and we mix them together, and we don't know which one is mine and which one is his specifically, because they're all, let's say, they all look the same. They all have the same markings. So this type of business model, when we do this mixture, then our capital or all this money is treated like one. So if we reach the quotum, let's say we only pay 2.5% on that amount. And we don't just say 2.5% on each of our amounts. And then, for example, if later on we want to sell or we want to, let's say, liquidate, then we'll liquidate based on the percentage of the amount that we originally pulled together. If it was 50-50, then we do 50-50. If it was uh, 60-40, then it'll be 60-40, etc. So that's a specific type of business plan. If they were to do it, then the rule for them paying zakah would be like one person paying zakah. And there's more details, of course, and that would be taken from the more comprehensive books of Islamic law. But right now, he just mentions that if they were to do that mixture, then they have to, the rule of it would be like they pay like one person. The zakat of fitr is obligatory upon every Muslim for himself and upon those whom he is obligated to support if they are Muslims, provided that they live through part of Ramadan and part of Shawwal, and he possesses a surplus beyond that which covers his debts, clothing needs, lodging, sustenance, and the sustenance of those whom he must support for the day of Fitr and the night after it. The due zakah for each individual is a saw of the most common staple crop of that area. So zakat al-fitr is not related to the amount of money that you have. It's just related to were you alive for a part of Ramadan and a part of Shawwal? If you were, let's say, someone was born 1 minute before Maghrib on the last day of Ramadan, then that person who is obligated to support them has to include them in the amount of zakatul fitr that he has to pay. Because, for example, the man, he has to pay for himself, he has to pay for his wife, he has to pay for his prepubescent children, he has to pay for his Muslim slave. So if he has, let's say, one wife, three prepubescent children, one slave, so he would pay one saw for himself, for his wife, and one saw for himself, one saw for his wife, one saw for each of his prepubescent children, and one saw for his Muslim slave. So that's five. Himself, his wife, six. Himself, his wife, his three kids, uh, and the Muslim slave. So he would pay six saw in total. There's a question. It says, "What if the wife works? Does he have to pay zakat for his wife?" Yes, even if the wife works, because it's um, it's related to the financial obligation. So the man, he's obligated to support his wife, even if she has her own money, even if she works and she has her own money. He can't tell, for example, you pay half of the rent. I'm only gonna pay half. No, if she wants to keep her money, if she wants to not pay any of the rent, the husband is the one who has to come up with the rent. So because that's his responsibility, for zakat al-fitr, he has to pay for her. Now she is allowed to pay for herself if, for example, like the husband allows her, or he says like, go ahead, she can pay for herself if she is and if she is one of the people that has to pay the zakah. There's a certain detail for the wife because she has to be yani, eligible. The intention to pay zakah is necessary for every type of zakah upon apportioning the amount to be paid as zakah. So now, once we know who has to pay it and how much they have to pay, now how do you pay? So when you're about to give it, you have to have the intention. When you're giving it, like when that money is actually in your hand and you're handing it to the one who deserves the zakah, you have the intention that you're paying the obligatory zakah. And you can do it before. You can have the intention before that when you take the money out that you're going to use to pay as zakah. While you're separating it, when you're separating it from your general money, you can have the intention that this money that I'm separating is zakah money and the obligatory zakah. But for sure, it has to be done when paying. It is an obligation to pay zakah to 8 categories of beneficiaries that are present in the area in which the zakah funds exist. So, who gets the zakah? It's specifically 8 types of Muslims. They have to be Muslim. It is by consensus that the zakah money is only for Muslims. It does not go to non-Muslims at all, period. It does not go to non-Muslims, only to Muslims. Zakah money goes to Muslims. Charity can be for Muslims and it can be for non-Muslims. Yani other than zakah, money can be given to Muslims and it can be given to non-Muslims. The zakah is specific to Muslims, period. There's some people nowadays that are trying to push an agenda, trying to say that it is valid to give zakat to the non-Muslims. A'udhu billah. This is breaching the ijma', the consensus. So it can only be given to these eight categories of Muslims. Number one, the destitute people, al-fuqara. So al-fuqara is a certain type, and it's severe poverty, which means that the Muslim, he needs, let's say, 1,000 a month to cover his bare necessities, food, clothing, and shelter. But he cannot find except, let's say, 300 or 400. He can only find less than half of 1,000. So this is a faqir. So he would be given zakat money. And the next category, the second, number two, is the poor people, al masakin. So they're poor as well, but not as severe. They need 1,000, but they can only find six or seven or eight. And they find less. They find more than half, but less than the total amount that they need. Then you have al-amiluna alayha, the zakah workers, and these are the workers that are employed, or not employed, but they are selected by the caliph. So if there's a caliph, he needs to make sure that the zakah is being collected and that it's being paid. So he sends the zakah worker to collect the zakah. They collect it, they document it, they take it to, let's say, a warehouse where they keep it and it's secure and safe, and then they process it, they distribute it to whoever it needs to be distributed to. So those workers, they do all those tasks, and they're not getting paid a salary for doing that job. So they receive some of the zakah for that. So this category doesn't exist now because there's no caliph now. So there are no zakah workers now. But in the past, that's how it used to be. Number four is the ones whose hearts are to be reconciled. Al-mu'allafatu qulubuhum. So these are converts to Islam that have newly converted, and they have yet to be fully integrated into the Muslim community. And it's just a natural thing. A person that they don't have any background in Islam, their parents are not Muslim, their grandparents are not Muslim. This was not even like something spoken in their house. And they grow up, they become an adult, they are guided to the truth. Allah Ta'ala guided them and endowed upon them this great blessing, and they become Muslim, and they know that this is the best thing, they know that this is what they have to do, they know that this is what they want to do. They become Muslim, and they're the only one in their family that's Muslim. And sometimes the family, they react in a negative way because they're ignorant, because they're scared, because they have hatred in their hearts, because they're fanatics, because they're closed minded, because they don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear the evidence. Uh, they could be atheists, or they could be Christians, or they could be Jews, or they could be Hindu. There's a lot of scenarios where the convert Muslim, he faces backlash from the people that are supposed to be supportive and loving and caring, etc. But of course, that points to, a toxic background that, the before, let's say, they knew about Islam, there was uh, also other issues like those type of people that react negatively. There's usually other underlying issues that happen, but still, or other types of abuse that they would do, but still, some Muslims, they do face that backlash, and some they don't. They have, like, their families don't give them any problems, and they support them, etc. But still, they're the only one that is Muslim, let's say, in their family or in their social circle. And so now they're stepping into this new, atmosphere, this new environment, new people that, subhanallah, also, and some Muslims, um, they don't implement Islam perfectly. They don't implement the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that new Muslim, this is his first experience with Muslims, so it takes some time for him to integrate and to feel, like he is at home, like he's with family. It takes some time naturally, and it could be a smooth transition as well. It's not always a horror story, but there are some uh saddening stories, and of course those are like extremes, not the norm. But and it does happen, and we can't deny, we can't turn a blind eye. So if to avoid those situations, and we tell our Muslim community to implement the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to understand, for example, how it was for the Muslims when they were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Muhajirun from Mecca, the Muslims from Mecca, when they migrated to Al Medina. When they got there, they didn't have anything except what they could carry. They didn't have anything except what they were wearing and what they could pack and what they could carry on their backs or what they could carry on their animals. They didn't have anything besides that. They left everything behind to obey the order of Allah. And so those Ansar in Al Medina, what did they do? Did they make them feel unwelcome? Did they make them feel like a burden? Did they make them feel like, that they're less of Muslims than they are? No, they welcomed them with open arms. They gave half of their things to these complete strangers that they just met, but because they're Muslim, they have that bond, and that's the place where they were coming from. That place of where we're brothers in Islam because we both have chosen to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We both have been guided to Allah, and that bond is stronger than any other bond that exists on this earth. So that's what helps that Muslim integrate. He feels that feeling, but until he feels that feeling, until he gets to that point, and he's still not yet fully integrated, he's eligible to receive the zakah money, because that, and it shows a certain commitment. It shows a certain inclusion, because he's just getting this zakah money, and that makes his heart feel that he's fully integrated. Number five is the slaves in a contract of emancipation. These are known as ar-riqab. Basically, it would be a slave that has made a deal with their slave master to, if that slave pays them a certain amount of money, then they buy themselves out of slavery, and they would be free, and they would be not a slave anymore. They would be considered a free Muslim. So if that Muslim, he made that contract with his slave owner, he's given zakah money so that he can pay, so that he can cover what he needs to pay, so that he can be free. Number six is the insolvent debtors, al-gharimun. These are the Muslims who they are drowning in debt. They are drowning in debt. They don't have a way to overcome. So they get zakah money so that they can get themselves out of debt. The volunteer warriors, fi sabilillah, it does not mean here any philanthropic deed. Philanthropic means charitable. Like when you, let's say, donate money to a school, you build a library, you build a park, fix the road, you build like a recreational center for the youth in the community. All that stuff is called philanthropy. You give to the homeless, you give to the starving. They give to like cancer research and all these things. It's basically charity. And the dunya people, that's what they do charity for, the dunya things. Like they build basketball courts and they, build the road and they build a stop sign. They, uh, uh, give to like hospitals and to libraries. And that's what they do. That's their charity. So in Islam, we have, of course, charity that we use the charity to build the mosque, to build an Islamic school, to fund a student of the Islamic knowledge, whether he's going to become a memorizer of Quran, or he's going to study the Islamic law, or he's going to study the Tawheed, or he's going to study the Hadith, to support him and fund him. This would be charity. To build an Islamic university, to build an Islamic musalla, to do fundraising for a school or a mosque. This is charity. This is Islamic philanthropy. This is feeding the hungry Muslims. If there's a homeless Muslim, get them somewhere to live or help them pay the rent, etc. That's charity. So this is not what is meant by fi sabilillah in the ayah of zakah. There's an ayah that is outlining all the recipients of the zakah. And at the end of the ayah, near the end of the ayah, it says, وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. So, وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ is referring to the volunteer warriors. The volunteer warriors, what does that mean? Yani, the Muslim government, of course, they have a military branch, just like any government would. So the military branch of the Islamic government, they would have soldiers that their job is to be a soldier. They get trained, they get housed, uh, they get paid to be a soldier, just like any government does. They have an army, they have the Marines, they have the Navy, they have the Air Force. So in the Islamic government, that would exist also. Of course, it would exist. We would have a Navy, we would have an army, we would have a special team, special forces, etc. So they go and do the military things that are needed for the Muslim government. Now, sometimes there would be, let's say, uh, a battle, or let's say a war. There's a war happening, and the Muslim government, they give the option. And in certain cases, it is a personal obligation. If a Muslim, let's say, town or village or city or country, let's say, is invaded by the non-Muslims, then it's a personal obligation on each able-bodied Muslim to defend. So whether they're part of the army or they're not part of the army, they have to defend. But for, let's say, uh, when the Muslim army or the Muslim government, they go on an expedition to a foreign country, the Muslim government gives the option to the the male Muslim. Let's say he's a carpenter, or he's a blacksmith, or he's a businessman. If they want to join the Muslim army and they want to participate in the military campaign, then they would. These are fi sabilillah. These are the volunteer warriors. So they're volunteering to go to the battle. And so, because of that, they would be all their expenses would be covered with zakah money. So they would receive zakah for the time that they're gone until the time that they get back, and they would get all the materials that they need: a vehicle, the armor, the weapons, the sustenance, and their families would be taken care of until they return. So that is what is meant in the ayah. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله. Here, وفي سبيل الله, it means the volunteer warriors. وابن السبيل, and that's referring to the traveler, which that's the next one that we're gonna mention. But fi sabilillah, it doesn't include any just any charitable project. So you can't use zakah to build a mosque. You can't use zakah to build a school. You can't use zakah to fund a student of the Islamic knowledge. You can't build zakah to plant a garden for orphans. You have to use the zakah for only these eight categories, and wafi sabilillah is referring to the volunteer warriors. Any those Muslims who participate in the battle that are not part of the Muslim army. They're not soldiers in the Muslim army, they're just volunteers that they wanted to join, so they get from the zakah. So whoever pays zakah to build a school, their zakah is invalid and they get a sin and they still owe it. And that money doesn't change possession. So the people that took it, they're obligated to return it. They can't use it or spend it. If someone pays zakat to build a mosque, the zakat is invalid and they get a sin and they still owe it. If someone paid zakat uh to and he print a book to print an Islamic book or to print Qur'ans, the zakat is invalid and they get a sin and they still owe it. And they can't say, "Oh, it's fi sabilillah," and they interpret fi sabilillah to mean any charity, which is a misinterpretation. Yes, the word fi sabilillah, it is used in another context to mean yani for the sake of Allah. But here in the ayah specifically, it's referring to the volunteer fighters. And number 8 is the traveler who does not possess sufficient funds to reach his destination, Ibn Sabil. So someone was traveling, a permissible travel, and before they got to their final destination, they ran out of money, so they're stranded. They would get zakah money so that they could reach their final destination. Even if from their point of departure, they have money there. Let's say they're rich there, they would still get zakah money to complete their journey. It is neither permissible nor valid to pay zakah to other than these 8 categories of people. So the zakah cannot be paid to anyone other than those 8 categories. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. So next week, inshallah, we will cover the fasting. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. The question is, for a father who can't pay minimum wedding costs for his daughter, is it permissible to give from zakah money? Uh, what the father doesn't have to pay anything for the marriage contract to be done. But I know that it's customary in many cultures for the father to be the one that he covers the expense of the procession, which is like, when they get dressed up and they invite people and the walima. Uh, but that's not. I've never heard or seen in the books of Islamic law that would be accounted for when determining whether the father has to pay zakah or not, because it's not an obligation. Any. It's not like a bare necessity. Uh, I will. And I'll research some things just to be sure. But yeah, so since it's not a bare necessity, it's not an obligation. It's not something that would be factored in. For Eid al-Fitr, it's factored in a certain thing, but that's just specifically for the Eid. For the marriage, I never heard that. Okay, the father, he's not obligated to pay anything in order for his daughter to get married, and uh, the only, let's say, money that is exchanged is the mahr, which is the right of the wife. So she is the only one that would, and that's not even a condition for the validity of the contract, but that she receive it right away. But yeah, that's the only money that would be exchanged. So yeah, I'll look into it more. Inshallah. Are there any other questions? طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. ربي اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات وبارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم.